Welcome to Ecstatic Yoga. I'm Grace. So happy you are here today. We are going to be learning and talking about and discussing the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, Samadhi Pada, Sutras 1 through 15. On our Zoom call, we'll be discussing it and getting everybody's wisdom and insights on these sutras. Today, I'm going to give you a review on the sutras. So let's begin. So Patanjali Yoga Sutras is part of Raja Yoga. Raja Yoga is the understanding and complete mastery of the mind. There are 5 types of yoga, which is Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, Raja Yoga, and Hatha Yoga. Raja Yoga has also been called Kingly Yoga, the yoga of control or mastery over the mind. The primary text for Raja Yoga is called the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, or Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, or Yoga Darsana. In the Yoga Sutras, yoga itself is defined as the cessation of the movements of consciousness. In other words, obtaining stillness of mind, a quiet mind. And this is the opposite of a mind that is full of thoughts, diversions, fluctuations, and disturbances. Raja Yoga also includes Patanjali's 8 limbs of yoga. So it's Yoga Sutras and the 8 limbs of yoga. And today's lesson is on Sutras 1 through 15 of Patanjali's Samadhi Pada of the Yoga Sutras. So an introduction to Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. It is not known exactly when Patanjali Maharishi lived, or if he was a single person or several people using the same title. It is estimated that the date of the sutras range between 5000 BC to 300 AC. Very ancient. Patanjali did not invent the system of Raja Yoga. He rather compiled ancient teachings and systemized the philosophy of pre-existing ideas and practices. Patanjali Maharishi, often called the father of yoga, comprised the first and foremost Raja Yoga scripture, organizing yogic thought. It is important to know that Patanjali didn't write the sutras himself. They come from talks, from his talks, that students wrote down and compiled, and they were finally compiled by Sri Swami Satyananda. Sutras are shorthand notes from his students, not even complete sentences, yet containing the entire philosophical message to ponder and discuss. Swami Satyananda, who compiled and got these all down into the book of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, compiled all the shorthand notes, all the ideas into this book. And this sage, Swami Satyananda, who guided thousands of people to the practice of yoga and brought the Yoga Sutras to life, he grew up in a small village in South India. He became a scholar in agriculture, technology, and science. He became very disillusioned with his work and became a full-time yogi. Practiced under many sages, many teachers, and finally became a monastic under Master Srivananda in 1949. Satyananda served in the ashram of this teacher as well, and then he also traveled to bring Raja Yoga and the Yoga Sutras to Southeast Asia and to the West. Satyananda did not belong to any one particular faith or religion or country. He was dedicated to the principle of truth is one. Paths are many. Truth is one, paths are many. He included people of all backgrounds and beliefs, respecting all paths leading to peace. He won many humanitarian awards and peace awards. He was a humble soul who taught his students to take what is useful in these sutras and to leave what is not. He also offered his students to meditate on anything one chooses, which is elevating of the consciousness. Both Patanjali and Sri Swami Satyananda were accepting of all. Their teachings are universal and all-inclusive of all faiths and all people and all paths. Here's a prayer from Sri Swami Satyananda. May the grace of all the realized yogis of every tradition be upon us, that we may succeed in realizing the peace and joy, which is the divine truth within. Because of this broad-minded acceptance of all methods, yoga has remained a universal practice, which can be studied and practiced by people of all faiths and all backgrounds. It is all-inclusive and based on science. The sutras expand students' spiritual path and the experience of their religion, their philosophy, and most important, their moment-to-moment life events. So wherever you are, wherever your spiritual path, yoga will simply expand upon it, deepen it. Raja Yoga is the science of mind. It is the control of mind. It is the most ancient form of yoga. For centuries, Raja Yoga was the only yoga, and it was simply yoga. When you say yoga, they meant Raja Yoga. Yet it is also contemporary and useful in present time, because Raja Yoga arose thousands of years ago, years before Hatha, including the physical poses. Many traditional yoga schools in India teach primarily Raja Yoga still to this day, called Kriya Yoga. Raja Yoga is an integral approach, including all aspects of the self: physical, emotional, mental, intellectual, and social. It is a scientific approach, including the whole life of a student, aiming to transform the student from a limited ego consciousness to a fully illuminated, awakened being, living in perfect peace, sharing their love and divine gifts, and living their highest joy and service to God and humanity. Therefore, if you desire to be a yoga instructor and learn the philosophy of yoga and live a yogic lifestyle and be a mentor as a yoga teacher, you will want to learn and apply Raja Yoga, which includes primarily the Yoga Sutras and Patanjali's 8 limbs of yoga. Main goal of the 8 limbs is yogic lifestyle, ethics, and reaching the state of samadhi, expanded awareness, becoming your soul's presence, one with your source. The main goal of the sutras is mastery of the mind, controlling the diversions of the mind, turning away from the lies of the mind, and choosing powerfully over and over again to listen to that one voice of truth, only that voice. Committing to your own peace, becoming a neutral observer of the mind, letting go of what no longer serves you, experiencing constant updating, evolution, and transformation of your own consciousness, aligning more and more, deeper and deeper with your innermost truth. Thy own self be true. Some Raja Yoga questions to ponder and experience. What am I? What is the mind? What is within me that is conscious? Does the mind determine our behavior and experience, or do we create and sustain its activity? Can we go within and control the mind? For thousands of years, yogis have contemplated the mysteries of the mind and consciousness. And Raja Yoga is a compilation of that wisdom. The intention of mastering the mind is ultimately acquiring the autonomy of peace of mind, stillness of mind, overcoming victim consciousness, letting go of past conditioning that no longer serves, finding peace within, listening to that one voice of truth, being responsive rather than reactive, living thy own self be true, living as your soul rather than the ego, living in unlimited mind rather than fearful limited mind, becoming fully alive, happy, and free. Sutra means thread, each thread being the barest thread of meaning, leaving each yoga teacher to take the threads and add their own beads of experience and wisdom, reflecting their lineage to support students in practicing yoga. You as a teacher will use your experiences and your wisdom to share with your students in contemplation of the Yoga Sutras. Discussions with yoga students of these sutras are the pathways to living them. Wisdom lives within us all. A teacher simply reminds the student and awakens their inner knowing so they can go on and teach and share their beads of experience and wisdom. There are 200 sutras divided into 4 sections called padas. The first one is the Samadhi Pada, portion 1. It's contemplation of the theory of yoga and most advanced stage called Samadhi. The second is Sadhana Pada, portion on the practice of the 8 limbs of yoga. The third one is Vibhuti Pada, portion on accomplishments and powers of faithful practice of the final 3 inner steps. Fourth is Kavala Pada, portion on absoluteness, cosmic philosophical views on yoga. Samadhi Pada, which we're going to be going over today. This is the first book of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras and called Samadhi Pada, which is the ultimate goal of yoga, samadhi. Samadhi means to unify, to be absorbed into all that isness, to become one with all that is. Patanjali has put the ultimate goal on the first pada, showing that yoga is not linear and that all the limbs and sutras are all part of a whole integration within a student. To practice samadhi is to know the infinite self, the silent witness, the pure conscious awareness as your identity, to know yourself as pure love. This pada invites us to move out of the mode of realm of separation and fear and move into the vaster realm of what you truly are, oneness. Samadhi is coming home to your true eternal nature as perfect love, knowing deeply that there is only love. There is only the self experiencing the self. Raja Yoga, the definition of Raja Yoga, the understanding and complete mastering of the mind. There are 5 types of yoga: jhana, bhakti, karma, raja, hatha. And Raja is our kingly yoga. And today's lessons are on Patanjali's Samadhi Pada of the Yoga Sutras. So let's begin. This is Sutras 1 through 15. And please, I'm going to do my best to pronounce these sutras correctly, but I may be falling into some error from time to time. And you will have the PDF on the page to look at the words. So number 1, Atha Yogana Susasana. Atha means now. Yoga of yoga. Anusasanam, exposition or instruction. Now the exposition of yoga is being made. Now is the magical word, inviting yoga students to attain toward deep moment-to-moment presence, being here now. Exposition or instruction is pointing to not talking about yoga, not just discussing the philosophy of yoga, but rather actually living the philosophy, practicing the yoga poses, meditations, and pranayamas. You cannot reach the goal of yoga unless you practice yoga. Yoga is to be practiced, lived, and experienced now, to deeply know the inner being now. Our second sutra is Yogas Sita Vritti Nirodham. Yogas is yoga. Chitta, of the mind stuff. Vritti, modifications. Nirodha, restraint. The restraint of the modifications of the mind stuff is yoga. The fundamental modification of the mind is to believe you are a separate self, an I or ego. Transforming the identity from individual or I to what Patanjali calls our essential true nature, our eternal self, pure conscious awareness. This sutra invites us to wake up from vritti, modifications of the mind, chitra, to a deep experiential inner knowing of the true self or samadhi, our true nature, pure infinite consciousness. In yoga, this is referred to as Satchitananda, pure, alive, alert, unbounded awareness. This sutra points to our full responsibility and full empowerment over vritti of the mind, chitta, and how we interpret each moment. Patanjali states that the entire of yoga is based on this sutra. Mastery of the mind. Creating heaven or hell is all in our hands. These first two sutras are the basis of all the other sutras. If we attain these first two sutras, we have attained samadhi and mastered all the sutras and the goal of yoga. Sutra 3. Tada drastu svarpupe vastanam. Tada, then, drastu, seer, svarupe, in his own nature, avastanam, abides. Then the seer abides in his own nature. The seer abides in his own true nature when the vitri is surrendered and the mind rests in stillness. Satchidananda uses the analogy of a lake or mirror, vitri being the ripples on the lake or the distortions within the mirror, and then it is difficult to see any clear reflection. Yet, when a student allows those vitri or disturbances to calm within the mind, just like a calm lake, we can see the pure reflection of the eternal self. By mastering the mind, creating silent stillness within, you enter into a natural remembrance of your original state. Sutra 4. Vitri sarupyam itaratra. Vitri, modifications of the mind stuff. Sarupyam, assumes the forms. Itaratra, at other times. At other times, the self appears to assume the forms of the mental modifications. We can get confused in believing in and identifying ourselves with labels, temporary states, and forms. In this state, we are not free. There will be times the yogi forgets their infinite self. Our identity is eternal, and when we confuse identity with temporary forms, titles, or the body, titles like our thoughts and emotions, being a man or a woman, a dentist or a teacher, tall or short, we lose awareness of our true nature, our true identity. We are neither a body or thoughts or emotions, nor any letters after our names. We are not our titles, degrees, and awards. We are not our clothing, style, our race, our economic status, our occupations, or our faiths. We are dominant when our dominant identity is this fluctuating, finite self. We suffer from feeling fearful, anxious, competitiveness, and conflict. We react rather than respond to life and live in the noisy, busy mind because we are identified with ourselves as with the diversions and fluctuations, movements of surface identities, rather than this deep, eternal identity. We are that which is beyond and deeper than all of that. the holy, free, eternal awareness that allows all of that to arise and fall. Behind the ever-changing forms is an unchanging oneness. In yoga, we attain to move toward knowing ourselves deeply as this eternal self. With our daily yoga practices, knowing we may not always be perfect, however, it is the direction we are moving towards, moving into love and away from fear through the practice of yoga. A yogi must be alert in observing the mind and notice when the mind moves into limitation and fear and away from love, and then consciously move back into the awareness of love, your true nature as your unlimited self. Sutra 5. Ritaha Pankatiya Klista Akalista. Ritaya. Modifications of the mind stuff. Panchataya, 5 kinds. Kalishta, painful. Akalishta, painless. There are 5 kinds of mental modifications which are either painful or painless. In Samadhi, we experience only the I am, with no thought diversions at all. The goal of yoga is to master the mind to a state of Samadhi at all times. And therefore, as a student of yoga, we aim toward that intention. And along the way, we falter at times. Mastery doesn't occur immediately. We journey to the goal of yoga by being vigilantly watchful of our minds. As thought forms arise, letting go of painful, fear-based, and negative thoughts, thoughts that do not serve, and replacing them with certain selfless thoughts or thoughts that create peace of mind. As we go inward, the consciousness corrects and heals the mind. The journey inward is where we need distinctions such as the 5 mental modifications to help us be aware as we watch the mind and to distinguish if the thoughts are taking in the direction of yoga or if those thoughts are taking us toward oneness, separation, unity consciousness, or that fear-based consciousness. But Patanjali tells us these are 5 kinds of vrittis grouped into categories of painful and painless. He distinguishes that it is not painful and pleasurable because painful circumstances can lead to growth and pleasurable circumstances can lead to pain. He mentions selflessness can lead to selfishness, can lead to pain unless it is selfishness in our attainment to peace and attainment to helping others. Selfish in your commitment to peace. Selfishly committing to retaining your peace. This kind of selfishness brings peace to others, other minds. And those who bring peace to themselves and others are happy. Sutra 6. Pramana Vipariyaya Vikalpa Nidra Smritaya. Pramana, right knowledge. Viparya, misconception. Vikalpa, verbal delusions. Nidra, sleep. Smartaya, memory. So here are these 5 kinds. The 5 kinds of modifications of the minds are right knowledge, pramana, viparaya, misconception, vikalpa, verbal delusion, nidra, sleep, and last one is smitaya, memory. In this sutra, Patanjali states the 5 types of vitris: right knowledge, misconception, verbal delusion, sleep, and memory. He explains each in the following sutras 7 to 11. Though all of these 5 types of mental fluctuations or modifications can be broken down into subcategories, the basic thoughts or modifications can be useful in observing the activity of the mind. In yoga, we want to be observant of our mental condition, always. Doing this Raja Yoga of mind mastery is just as important as the physical asana practices. Only when the mind is both absorbed and still are we truly practicing yoga. 7. This is a long word. Pratyaksanumana kamaha pramanani. Pratyakasha, direct perception. Anumana, interference. Agama, scriptural testimony. Pramanani are those sources of right knowledge. We gain correct knowledge and accurate information from our own direct experience. Things that we observe, see, and hear fall into this category. Knowledge may also come from things that we figure out when from an accurate sources of information. Learning through yoga practice that arching our back in our cow allows the spine to extend. It's a great example of this true knowledge, right knowledge. We may also gain correct yogic knowledge from a yoga master or many years of a controlled study and testing. The sources of right knowledge are direct perception, inference, and scriptural testimony. Right knowledge is not based on perception, interpretation, judgment, hearsay. It is rather direct experience, inference, or what all scriptures universally point to. However, it is also important to know that knowledge is infinite as we live in an infinite universe. That we can never be rigid or stuck in what is right or true, because ultimately only experience of deep samadhi can illuminate our minds. Deep spiritual knowing is not in words, not in rules or absolutes, but in an incomprehensible mystery of experience. What Patanjali expresses with these 3 aspects of right knowing can also be stated as right-mindedness, a neutral, direct observation rather than interpretation of the observation. To infer is to see the sky as dark and infer it is nighttime. To see the ice melting and infer the temperature is above freezing. As with scriptures, because of right knowledge doesn't change over time, we can look at main themes all sacred texts affirm, such as love your neighbor as yourself. Kingdom of heaven dwells within. Right knowledge always illuminates. Sutra 8. Viparyayo mitajunan atadrupa pratistam. Vapariyaha, misconception is. Mithyajananam, false knowledge. Atadrupa, not on that form. Pratihistam, based. Misconception occurs when knowledge of something is not based on its true form. Illusion or misconception can be thought of as incorrect knowledge. Basing your information and conclusions on inaccurate or incomplete perceptions is one way to get wrongful information. Illusions may be called distortions of reality. In the dark, you see a monster, yet in reality, it's just a tree. Yet your heart races and the fight or flight response kicks in. Even though there is no monster, you have created impressions and thought waves in the universe. You believe you are not loved by a parent or a lover because they don't do this or that, or they didn't do this or that. Yet in reality, that thought is not true at all. You are just a child and confused. You are making their action mean something that wasn't true, a misconception. It is also called ignorance, confusion, false conclusions or meanings, delusion, the mind telling you lies, or even at times insanity, because the mind falls out of reality. We know we are in our right mind by our experience of peace. We know we are in misconception by our experience of some form of conflict, regardless of the form it takes. This interferes with our spiritual evolution. 9. Sabdajinanan Pupati Vastu Sunyo Vikalpa. Sadajanunpati, knowledge on words. Anupati, arises. Vastu, reality. Sunyo, without any. Vikalpa, verbal delusion. An image that arises in hearing mere words without any reality at its basis is verbal delusion. Any delusional information not backed by knowledge is not based in reality. Imagination may bring thought and may be creative and form some delusions. Various mental illnesses may be types of delusion. Even daydreams, when the mind roams and is free, can be not based in reality. All these delusional thoughts take us away from right thinking, bring us often into pain, and delay us as we are pursuing our yoga goals. I'll give you an example from my own life. I had a friend that would call me only when she and a mutual friend were having a disagreement. She would say things about this friend that would get me upset. And later on, often I would find out that what she said was not exactly true. or maybe even not even close to being true. And so I got upset over nothing, over lies. So it didn't take me long, a little while, and I became wise to this friend and knew when she called, she would be having trouble with this mutual friend. And I was not going to buy into what she said. I was not going to get upset about what she said because I was very clear that most of it was probably just her story. And I listened and I supported her, but I didn't get engaged. I didn't get involved, and I didn't get upset. But as a friend, I listened and I was empathetic. And so this is a form of verbal delusion. And it's not worth getting upset about, whether it's some story in your own mind or it's a story someone else is saying that you cannot be sure that is true, or even a story you hear on the news that you cannot be sure is true, could be spun. This happens also when we're attached to beliefs without true knowledge or inquiring deeper, believing the news and becoming upset when it has been spun or twisted to that program's views. Or becoming attached to any belief system can be hurtful, because when there's beliefs, points of views, perceptions, they all are dwelling in the realm of interpretation rather than reality. Patanjali warns us to not get attached or stuck on words conceptually, but to rather go deeper and to come to the lived experience of the world in the moment. For example, too, if you talk about creating peace, yet you are yourself are disturbed within, it is better to be the change you want to see in the world. It is wise to not become attached to anything you hear, any particular belief system, not even yoga, but instead live your truth. In the end, it's your life. It's your heart's moment-to-moment wisdom that is your greatest guide. And even that will change from moment to moment. Reality is an experience of samadhi, your pure conscious awareness. You exist. You exist. What you are is beyond all words, all thoughts, all meanings, all beliefs, beyond your body, beyond your emotions. That permanent self that exists, that conscious awareness, which allows all the temporary forms of the physical world to arise and fall. Sutra 10. Abhava pratyalabhamana vitri nidra. Abgava, nothingness. Pratyaha, cognition. Alabhana, support. Vitir, modifications of the mind. Nidra, sleep. The mental modification supported by cognition of nothingness is sleep. Sleep is an experience we're all familiar with. It takes place in an area of our brain. While we sleep, our body is awake. It continues to breathe. The heart continues to pump blood. Our organs continue to process chemicals. Even our hair and fingernails continue to grow. The biomechanics of the body continue to function during sleep. Patanjali states that even in deep sleep, void of dreaming, there is an event in the field of consciousness. There is a thought wave of nothingness that occurs in sleep that human physiological studies have confirmed. Mentally, we are inert and not connected to our senses of perception. Through consistent practice, our awareness can reach a level of stillness beyond sleep. Sutra 11. Anubhuta Isa Ya Sampramawash Smriti. Anubhuta, experienced. Vishaya, objects. Asamprama Osha, not forgotten. Smriti, memory. When the mental modification of an object previously experienced and not forgotten comes back to consciousness, that is memory. Memory takes us out of presence. When we recollect, we may be based on any of the other states of consciousness, for example, correct knowledge or delusion. Though our memory may incorrectly recall the past, it may also, when used with discrimination, allow us to compare current actions and conditions against previous experience and be helpful. Memories can be internal or external. Memories can arise during wakefulness or sleep. Memories can be breachy when they arise from unresolved experiences. Memories can also have value when making our mental activity aligned, favorable, and happy. These are the 5 kinds of vitris that must be controlled in order to attain samadhi or deep inner stillness and peace. 12. Sutra 12. Abhyasa Virgya Bayam Tiniradha. Abhyasa, by practice. Viragya Bayam, by non-attachment. Tat, they, Nirodha, restrained. These mental modifications are restrained by practice and non-attachment. Patanjali states that through continued practice, you will master the vitri of the mind. Reach a state of non-attachment and liberation, a birth of transcendental state of consciousness, the goal of yoga. Sutra 13. Tatra Sithito Yatino Ayasa. Tatra, of these. Sthita, steadiness. Yatno, effort. Abhyash, practice. Of these 2, effort towards steadiness of mind is practice. Patanjali states continuous practice is necessary. He states not just a few days or months, but continuous, always being at it, eternally watchful, scrutinizing every thought, every word, and action. He urges students to keep coming back to the practice of yoga, the whole practice, all 8 limbs, mind, body, and spirit, and you will find your natural freedom. Patanjali shares 3 qualifications in following sutras to help us be eternally mindful. Sutra 14. Sa tu Durga Kala Narantarya Satkari Sevito Dradhab Niha. Sa, this, to, and, Durga, long, Kala, time, Naritarya, without break, Satkara, earnestness, Asivita, well attended to, Dridhabhumi, firm ground. Practice becomes firmly grounded when and well attended to for a long time, without break and in all earnest. A yogi practices meditation regularly. A yogi observes the mind, observes the inner patterns that are not serving them, observes the frustrations, practices observation, practices turning away and turning them over and over again. This begins a journey of overcoming them, a journey of patient practice, so the mind becomes settled and firmly grounded in stillness. It is not done in a week or a month or even a year. It needs to be ongoing throughout the entire physical life. A yogi lives a yogic lifestyle of regularly observing and quieting the mind and connecting within. The ongoing practice of yoga will heal obsessive thinking, any negative thoughts, grudges, toxicity, and victimhood within the mind, and interrupt the negative conditioning so you can be non-resistant, wholly free, a radiantly clear conduit for the divine to flow through, a healed and whole mind, which is rests in peace while walking the earth. This leads to authentically loving relationships, true and deep happiness, and enjoyment of life. Sutra 15, the final sutra for this lesson. Dritanusvarika Visaya Vitrisanyasya Vasikara Samuna Paragyam. Drishta, seen. Anusravika, heard. Visaya, object. Vitrisanasya, of him who is free from craving. Vasikara, mastery. Samjana, consciousness. Vargyam, non-attachment. The consciousness of self-mastery is one who is free from craving from objects seen or heard about, is non-attachment. A yogi observes the mind, observes the patterns, cravings, and aversions that are not serving them, observing frustrations that come from attachment. By practicing observation, witness consciousness, they begin the journey of overcoming these frustrations. It is a committed process, yet the ultimate goal is absolute freedom. The ongoing practice of yoga will heal obsessive thinking, addictions, grudges, toxicity, victimhood, and attachments within the mind. Then a state of allowing, being with what arises, peace, non-resistance, and becoming a wholly free and clear conduit for the divine to flow through arises. To be truly happy and enjoy life. Life is meant to be enjoyed. Thank you so much for being here with this lesson on the Yoga Sutras today. 1 through 15 of the Samadhi Pada, and we will be discussing these sutras, and I'm excited to get your wisdom and your experience and your input on these sutras and how we can work towards mastering our mind for a state of samadhi and peace within more and more often till we finally have that permanent state of samadhi within us as we walk the earth. Welcome. So grateful you're here. I am Grace and wishing you a most beautiful and most blessed day. Namaste.